Oh. Hello, hello. Okay, let me come and chat to you. What we're going to do then is, throughout the week as I go on, I'm doing wee jobs here and there. I'm also, as I'm doing them, going to talk to you about the tools I'm using to do those jobs, because a few of you guys have been asking on Instagram about what my favourite tools are and tools I recommend and stuff. I was going to do this as an actual tools I recommend type video, but everybody's done that. So I'm just going to go around, get all my chores done and just chat to you real about the stuff I'm actually using. So the first thing I need to do then is hit the shed and get buckets and stuff out. See you in a minute. This is actually a really handy opportunity to talk to you then. I'm just grabbing a spade, okay? Every garden probably has a spade, and if it doesn't, I totally recommend it. Spades are so useful, you can't believe just how useful they are for things you probably wouldn't expect. And I know our garden doesn't have a lot of space in the way that I would dig in. You guys know that. But there are still times when a spade is much better than a little hand trowel, like this one. So I'm going to show you this. I'm going to put you down. Hang on. This is the ultimate in suck. I've had to put the camera way down here because I didn't bring the tripod in. But it's so I can show you this. Right. You get different types of spades for different jobs, okay? And I'm not an expert in spades, so I'm not going to go into all that stuff for you. But what I am going to say that's handy is we've got two spades. One is much bigger and heavier than the other, okay? Now, again, not an expert. I'll bet you there's a reason for that. But what we have is Kate is much bigger than me, and I use the little spade and she uses the big one. Yeah? Thing is, it's handy because if we're in the raised beds, things like that, this can be too big sometimes and quite cumbersome, and this is just perfect. Right, whole reason for the spade is this. So, basically, salvias, right? Loads of people grow salvias. I know loads of you guys grow salvias. Could you tell me about it? But here's an interesting thing. Salvias technically are perennials, which means they don't die like at the end of the year. They actually continue to grow, depending on where you live. So here, they're considered annuals because they don't often manage through the winter here. The frosts tend to kill them off, okay? So because of that, normally folk would move them in. That's people out walking their dogs, sorry. Normally people would move them into the greenhouses, conservatories, that type of thing, and protect them. I'm not going to do that. I've taken loads of cuttings, so if it goes, hopefully my cuttings will take and I'll be fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it to a bit of the garden that doesn't get hammered by doesn't get hammered by the frost quite as badly, in the hope that it will survive, because it's also where we want this to go. Because as you know, I put it in the herb bed thinking it was a wee herb plant, and it's not. It's a total massive big shrub. So I have to move it anyway. So I'm putting it over here, which is why I need the spade. Tools for this job. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out. I suspect it's probably got quite a decent root system, but obviously it's not a big, huge bed that I can get the spade in. So this is where little hand trowel comes in and my hori-hori. Now, you guys know I love my hori-hori. This is my favourite of all my garden tools, garden and greenhouse. And I've said it before, but it's a knife blade on one side and a saw blade on the other. And it's a beveled blade, so it's a bit like a long, thin trowel with sharp edges. It is fantastic for dealing with root balls. And this trowel I love. Kate bought me this. It was our wooden anniversary this year. So Kate bought me this trowel and my little, what do I call it? Hooky thing? A clawy thing. I'm going to take you in a second to the greenhouse and show you that, because I've got a job that needs done in there. But she got me both of these as an anniversary gift. And they're just really nice long handles, which is really nice and handy for working with. Gives you a bit of pivot, which is handy. Fulcrum, that's it, fulcrum action. And it's a really nice little stainless steel blade on it. Love these guys. So, let's see how we go. Yeah, I can hear those roots. Now, right. I can feel that that's really not going to go. So, saw end. See now why I was saying about the nice long handle? Right. Okay, over to the bed and I'll show you where it's going. I am going to fall over in a minute. I'm going to shove it in here. We had loads and loads of sunflowers and stuff in here, so I'm actually going to just put it in this gap here. Just on an off note, these are awesome. It rains a lot here, so plants fall over a lot. These are a really nice way of keeping them held up without them looking overly rigid, like when you put a cane in. So like I say, the plan is it's going to go here, so I'm just going to dig out a hole for it big enough. And it's one of those things, most of the time, a little hand trowel does awesome here, but there are sometimes it's just quicker. Gladioli bulbs, so I need to make sure they go back in. Oh, it's going to be one of those days today. Stuff's just going to go wrong. My handle on my bucket snapped and I dropped it. I've dug out the space here for all this, and all my bulbs were in there. I hadn't realised. I thought it was an empty space, so I'm going to have to re-put all the bulbs back in. Why is it always days when you don't have a lot of time and stuff goes wrong? Right, sleeves up and on we go. The other thing I do with the hory sometimes is I use the flat side to just bash at root balls to get, that's a horrible word to say, bash at root balls, to very gently persuade the soil to fall off of the root balls. Because you don't always want all that soil. Gently now. So, that gives me the most amazing opportunity to talk to you about this guy. I've mentioned it before, I've mentioned it in other videos, but this is just a bulb planter and I love it because it makes it really easy to get a hole in the soil the size you need. You just press. So I'm going to put the bulbs back in around here because that's where they came from. So I do that and it is now taking a hole out of the soil. It's got measurements on the side so I know how deep I need to go for different types of bulbs and things. But here's the cool thing. So I'm going to try and not disturb anything. That's what came out. They're all stuck together. It's got this spring mechanism on it, which means I press it and it releases the soil. I just really like it. I think it's a nice, simple way of doing things. Okay, that is me for today, because I need to nip back in, because I was just out at lunchtime. Tomorrow, I'm going to take you into the greenhouse, because I've got a few bits and bobs in there I want to do with you. And like I said earlier, I'm going to show you my hooky thing. Right, see you in a bit. Because, of course, for me, it's tomorrow. For you, it's like... So another awesome tool, and I use this in the greenhouse and in the garden. I have no idea what the official name for this is. And it doesn't say on it. Kate bought me this, so I've no clue. It's made by a company called Spear & Jackson, who there is loads and loads of gardening stuff online by these guys. But I call it my kind of clawy thing. You've probably heard me say it in a video, actually. It's my clawy thing. It is basically 3 sharp prongs, and it acts like it's got a long handle, so it gives me a bit of momentum. But I use it for lots of things. So I use it for if I'm doing hand things in the soil, like moving soil around and stuff. Whereas if you were doing it standing in a big bed, you could use a rake. This acts like a kind of hand rake almost, although I don't think that's what it's made for. But also I use it a lot when I'm dealing with pots. And you've seen me using this when I'm emptying the pots at the end of the year. All the quad grow pots, and of course they're packed with roots, so I use this to try and get as much of the soil away from the root balls as possible, so that when I'm chopping things up for the compost bin or whatever, you know, it's not just a big lump that's going in there. So I absolutely love this. So yeah, so just as a matter of example, this was the old tarragon that was grown in here. You saw it was amazing growing in here over the summer. Not doing so well in here now, which is okay though, because I took a cutting and took it indoors, and that's doing fine. So I'm just going to bin this basically, because there's no point in keeping it. So I thought it'd be a good chance to show you the hooky thing in action. I always keep, I'll talk about this in a second as well, I always keep these trays because they're just so handy to have. It's the bottom of one of my propagators, but I just use it as a tray to catch things as well, to try and keep places tidy as I possibly can as well. Okay, that's kind of put a spanner in the works. So, this tarragon was going in the bin because it's dead and not growing anymore, except now that I've taken it out of the pot, it's got loads of new shoots coming up. What do I do? On one hand, that gives me new shoots from an already really strong plant that I can start things off with next spring. But on the other hand, it's cold in here. It's not really going to do anything over winter, and I'll have to keep it going and look after it. Shall we just go for it? What I'm going to do then is I'm going to cut back all the dead stuff and keep it going, and we'll see, and I'll give you updates. Let's see if it works. Look, I was going to bin it anyway, so what's the worst that can happen? Now, you might be thinking, but Eli, why are you bothering to take all of that stuff off? Why not just leave it? Because it's not doing any harm. Which is true. Okay, I could just leave it, but I'm just being careful, because if you guys follow me regularly, you will know I've talked about something called fungus gnats, okay? And they like, basically, fungus or any rotten vegetation type stuff. They're really, if you use compost with peat in it, then they really love that stuff, because obviously there's loads of that peat in there, that organic stuff breaking down. So I don't want to leave lots of rotten leaves and stems on here, because it will just encourage them. Okay, so yeah. So we've got shoots here in different stages of development. So yeah, I might actually just put this in a propagator. Back in the pot. Not sure where. Now, this is a good opportunity to give you guys a wee update, because that's the carrot seeds that I planted. I don't know how they're doing in your garden, but nothing yet. Still nothing germinated. And that's the thing. I don't know if this will work. This was an experiment. I don't know if they'll germinate in the current temperatures. So hence why I've got cellophane wrap, something the Americans call it, we call it cling film here, over the top of the pots, to try and keep any kind of moisture and stuff in there without me having to keep watering them. And also I've got them in this big propagator, hoping it might help. Looking at this, right, they haven't germinated yet. Try to think, how am I going to fit stuff in here? Right, little guy, that's your new home. That's that done. Okay, I was about to do a whole spiel about these big buckets. This was Kate's pick for top tools to tell you guys about. Technically it's not a tool, but it's absolutely awesome and vital in the garden. And she would like me to dedicate these buckets to naturally JB. Because you know how when you're going around and you're deadheading and you're weeding and you're picking up rubbish? Well, JB, Kate would like you to know that if you do all that weeding and you just dump that pile of weeds on the ground, chances are some of those weeds are going to drop seeds and things and or you're not going to get them all cleaned up. So she would like you to go and buy yourself some buckets or containers or any of such. Like, these are really cheap and you can get them in your local hardware store. You've done it again, haven't you? You've started with a little bucket and now you've run out of space.
Maybe.
Would you like to swap buckets?
Yes, please.
Would you look at that, JB? Different sizes of bucket and everything. Nice and easy to carry around. However, I digress. I don't actually, I'm now going to digress because we have just discovered something really heartbreaking. Okay, I've got a massive conundrum and I don't have the answer yet. So when I know the answer, I'll tell you. But I said to you guys that I was really worried about the fact that there was no ventilation in here because of the bubble wrap. And I showed you that the floor doesn't seem to dry out the way it should. But I've just discovered this. This is an empty propagator that's just sitting up on the shelf here. And the leaves off the hydrangea are falling onto it. And I noticed, I don't know if you can see this in camera, but it has mould on it, which is and it's quite a lot. That's actually really, really worrying. So I'm going to have to scrub everything down. But looking at the hydrangea as well, because I thought one of the big things I noticed was normally by this time, mines have dropped all of their leaves. And when I brought them into the greenhouse before, the last previous years before we bubble wrapped, they acted exactly the same way. They had dropped all their leaves by now. This one still hasn't, obviously. If I give it a good shake, it'll drop leaves. But in doing that, I noticed, now I'm going to bring you in and let you see this. There is mould on the hydrangea. So I'm quite torn. I don't know. Conundrums. So I'm going to have a think and I'll let you guys know what I decide. But this was my whole thing when I said how there is no info out there. There's lots of, this is how to bubble wrap your greenhouse, but there's no info about, well, if you bubble wrap it, this is what it's like. Especially in a country like Scotland where it's just wet all the time. Okay, I'll come back to you. Can you help me out the door with this? You got the lip. Yeah. Because that's the thing, it's not heavy anymore.
No, it's not.
Waterlogged.
Waterlogged.
Here's another tool I totally recommend. Help. What you can see is the leaves are just coming off. I'm not having to pull them. They're all ready to drop. And yeah, stems with mould. And it's all the new buds that have got mould on them because that's soft new growth. That's gutting. Well, it's all a learning experience. So from this, remember I told you, when you're cutting back, nodes and buds? So yeah, always looking for a learning experience. So, this is in fact the very last tool I'm going to show you because, to be honest, I'm feeling a wee bit freaked out and stuff and I'm not at my chirpiest, but all that panic. So I went and had lunch, tried to calm down a bit, went online, spoke to a few other gardening friends of mine, and the majority of the greenhouse panic is over. It's not mould caused by the condensation as such. It is basically called sooty mould, and it's been aphids on here has caused it because they've created the honeydew, the sweet sort of secretion, the reason ants farm aphids, and then the mould has set in on that. So I have given this a really good trim back. Anything that I couldn't clean off, I trimmed and gave it a prune. Most of it's actually cleaned off okay, but I'm just being very careful. A lot of this is going to drop anyway, so, you know, it's not the end of the world. But this is the next tool. This is just a sprayer, and this is what my insecticidal soap is in. It makes it easier to get underneath leaves, not just over the top. But because it's a nice big vat like this, it's just there in the shed for whenever I need it. And it's dead easy to carry it around the garden. And like I say, it's easy to get underneath, because that's important. You can't miss the undersides. And if you didn't see my video about insecticidal soap spray and neem spray, I would absolutely really recommend you go and watch at least the insecticidal soap, because there's a lot of myths out there that you can, if you follow them, you can actually damage your plants. So I lay it all out there and be totally honest about it, so I'd recommend it. I'll do the usual and I'll put it up here, and I'll put it in the description as well. More homework for you guys over winter. Okay. And that's it. Okay, I'm going to finish up there, guys. It's been a bit of a mad one this week, and my mad greenhouse panic. So I'm happy to say that I, in fact, was correct after the panic had subsided, and it's sooty mould, which is just basically down to aphids on the plant creating the sweet honeydew, and that is just there for the taking, so the mould sits in on that. It had basically dripped from the plant because I hadn't noticed it, because the way the plant was, I couldn't get around it and stuff. So it had dripped, and that's why it had got onto the propagator, the shelf, the staging, that kind of thing. So it's all been cleaned up, and hopefully we shouldn't see any more of that. I'm just going to leave the hydrangea out just now. I'll give it maybe 4 or 5 days, and then I'll give it a second treat with the insecticidal soap spray. And then, if it's looking okay and there's no more aphids, it can go back in the greenhouse, and I'll keep a better eye on things this time. But yeah, lessons learned, because, you know, I was that close to taking all that bubble wrap out the greenhouse, which is not a small job. See you guys.